Can you tell me about what freedom would feel like? When you imagine it, what does it look like?
Well, it's that song, Freedom, Freedom, marching on the freedom land.
Hey y'all, welcome back to Natal. I'm Martina Abrahams Ilunga.
And I'm Gabrielle Horton. Woo, so much has happened since our last season. Oh my goodness. It's been a lot.
Girl, it's been a whole lot. And just a few months after we wrapped, the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade on June 24th, 2022, effectively eliminating the constitutional right to abortion after 50 years.
And this, of course, sent shockwaves across the nation and around the world.
Yes, it did.
You know, this landmark decision is also known as Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization, and it upheld a Mississippi abortion law at the center of the case.
Now, for reproductive justice advocates who've been working in this space, nothing about this was a surprise. For one, the Supreme Court leaked a draft of the decision months in advance.
That really feels like forever ago. They sure did.
It really does. But let's be real. These attempts to restrict abortion access at the federal and state level have been going on for decades.
Absolutely. So, when the decision came down, we already knew the ripple effects were soon going to come and that they were going to land the harshest on Black women, queer and trans people, immigrants and disabled folks, poor and working class communities. Also, people living in states with limited access to health care, let alone child care. And really, the list goes on and on and on. Because as you probably already guessed it, Roe v. Wade was about a whole lot more than just abortions. It already says so much that more than half of Black women, ages 15 through 49, live in one of the 21 states with severe abortion restrictions or just outright bans. But shout out to voters because at the time of this recording, 7 states have passed measures to expand or just full out protect abortion access.
And thank God they did, because on top of not having legal protections to access an abortion, Black people and families are also bearing the added cost of traveling farther and farther for care in other states. The Dobbs decision exacerbates the obstacles that Black birthing folks already face while seeking safe pregnancy and childbirth care across the country. It's also affected access to miscarriage care and IVF treatment and threatening surrogacy and donor-assisted conception, so much of which will have an outsized impact on LGBTQ+ families.
When we think about this larger movement, it is really about our human right to maintain our personal bodily autonomy.
Yes.
The right to have children or not, and to parent the children we do have in safe and sustainable communities. And, that's exactly what Sister Song coined as reproductive justice more than 30 years ago.
So this season, we continue the natal tradition of passing the microphone. You'll hear a whole lot less from the two of us and a whole lot more from Black birth workers and medical providers, lawyers, and OG activists alike about what's really going on before, during, and beyond Roe.
Because as you'll hear from them, Roe was never the pinnacle of perfection, but merely a stepping stone to get us a little bit closer. Which is why this first episode is incredibly special for us. It's an intimate conversation between Kwajelyn Jackson and Miss Marie Leaner.
Now, Kwajelyn serves as the executive director of the Feminist Women's Health Center, an independent and not-for-profit reproductive healthcare clinic and abortion provider in Atlanta, Georgia.
Of course, Georgia has been very much in the news the past couple years for its restrictive and deadly 6-week abortion ban. But through it all, Kwajelyn and her team and other organizers have worked tirelessly to get pregnant people the resources and care they need. And well, Marie? Oh, Marie?
The Marie Leaner. She was a founding member of the Jane Collective and one of its only Black members.
Yes.
Now, y'all, the Janes are a big deal. They were a group of badass, fearless women who built an underground network across Chicago to help women access safe and compassionate abortions in the 60s and 70s, before Roe.
This history that Martina's talking about is so beautifully captured in the HBO documentary, The Janes, and it came out a couple years ago in 2022, so we'll be sure to link to it in our show notes, but it is really such a great watch.
A fantastic watch.
Today's conversation is really that kind of tender, intergenerational exchange that touches you deep in your soul. It's very much like you're in the room with a legend.
Because you are. I mean, this is the first time I've cried during an interview.
I know. I mean, honestly, how could you not? Our entire team was so very emotional. It was a really special moment for us. So just a heads up, Kwajelyn and Marie recorded this a couple weeks before the November election. Together, they talk about their upbringings in the reproductive justice movement, the power of Black women organizing, and their dreams for the future.
And as we continue to wrap our mind around what's ahead, including the uncertainty, this conversation reminds us that we've been doing this. We're still doing this. And we're going to keep doing this until the work is done.
Let's get into it.
Hi, I'm Kwajelyn Jackson. I'm the Executive Director of Feminist Women's Health Center in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm very excited to be in this conversation.
My name is Marie Leaner. I'm a member of the Janes Chicago group. And what I've done has been a lot of women's work. And I've been doing that particularly in relation to Roe v. Wade and Black women's rights. And I think that sums it up. But it's quite exceptional that we're talking about this right now. And I'm very, very, very honored to be a participant in this conversation at this point in time.
Well, I'm absolutely honored to talk to you as well and to learn a little bit about what it was like in those early days of the Janes and doing the work before the Roe decision even came to pass. Now, certainly we're living in the aftermath of the Dobbs decision. But before that, the reproductive justice movement included people like you on the ground who were doing the work and serving the people. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about what it was like in 1968 when you were growing up in Chicago. What was your life like?
Well, I was a troublemaker, in short, and I participated in a number of critical conversations and decisions that affected women of color as well as in general. I remember giving an interview where I said I had a lot I wanted to say and a lot I had to offer, and it was my time. It was time for all people of color, and I was happy to be a part of that conversation. I also felt very privileged, honestly, to have been a part of the generation that specifically was a part of the movement. The March on Selma, the March on, I'm sorry, I'm trying to gather my thoughts.
Take your time.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I mean, there's just so much that's happened over the past years. You know, history is amazing.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
It is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And we love to hear about folks causing good trouble then and now. I'd love to hear a little bit about your time in the Jane Collective. Can you tell us about how you heard about the Janes and what brought you to join?
Absolutely. Happy to tell the story. I almost didn't become a member of the Jane organization. I was part of the Janes as part of the Chicago Women's Liberation union. And I wasn't going to join, in part because I'm a Catholic. My father was a Catholic. My mother was a Catholic.
Mm.
And for me, there was a constitutional intersection that held me back from a religious standpoint. And the women's movement was just getting started.
What made you change your mind?
The issue.
Mm.
There was nothing else. I mean, it was quite evident that we needed change. It was not only that we needed change, but that lives depended on it. It wasn't just an issue or a glorified significance.
Mm-hmm.
Lives depended on it.
Yeah.
Black and brown lives depended on it. And that the gains that we had hoped to make for the country were evident. And if we didn't have them, we were going to be set back phenomenally.
Mm-hmm.
That was a huge cost. It was as big a cost as any that we've had in recent history. So I had no choice. I mean, really, I was part of the civil rights movement. I was part of the Black and brown movement. I felt that I had to participate in the ongoing debate for human rights, that it was not only a question, but it was an obligation. And I had to step up, show up.
That's incredible. And what a courageous decision to make. Do you remember how you felt when you learned that abortion had been made legalized?
Yeah, I was stunned. I was stunned. I didn't believe it. I'm sometimes stunned by history. And I thought, well, this will never stand. This is a decision that will go down in history and will see the twist of time like every other bad decision that's been made over the course of history. I was sure, frankly, that it was going to hit the dust.
Wow. I mean, unfortunately, it took almost 50 years, but you were right. You were right that it didn't stand. And now we're in a new environment.
Absolutely new environment. And, it's not over.
That's right.
It's not over. It's never over. The fact that women's rights hang on a string, women's rights are never guaranteed, never certain. It's never assured.
That's right. The fights for Black people in the United States, for women in the United States, are constant and exhausting, but we know ultimately that our freedom is important and necessary. And so we won't just allow for our rights to be diminished. We'll keep fighting.
Exactly. We have to.
Hey, NATO fam! Tatiana Ali here, and I want to share something super special with you. I'm the founder and designer of Baby Yams, where we create handmade baby quilts with love, and all for a cause close to my heart. When you purchase baby yams, profits go straight to supporting Black and brown birth workers who are on the ground making a real impact. With our partner organization, Birth Future Foundation, we've already awarded $75,000 in midwifery grants this year alone. And guess what? We've got exciting new holiday goodies on the site right now. So head over to baby-yams.com. And because you're a part of this beautiful natal community, be sure to use code NATAL15 for 15% off your purchase. Let's support each other and keep this movement growing. Now, back to the show.
I remember watching the movie Dirty Dancing when I was a young teenager. It was my favorite movie growing up, but mostly because of the dancing part. But I can remember that one of the characters, Penny, was quote unquote in trouble. When I first saw the movie, it definitely didn't resonate. I was like, I don't know why Penny's in trouble. But after repeated watchings, it started to become clear that Penny was dealing with an unplanned pregnancy and dealing with an illegal abortion before the Roe versus Wade decision had been made. I still didn't necessarily have like a clear understanding of the Supreme Court decision until I went to college. But I think I just had a really casual, matter-of-fact understanding about pregnancy and abortion when I was a teenager. I knew people who were on birth control. I knew people who had pregnancies and delivered very young. It really didn't feel like a controversial issue in my community. And so I think for most of my young adulthood and, teenagehood, it seemed matter of fact. It seemed like a normal part of life. I knew Black people, my friends, who were dealing with reproductive health care, but I didn't see them on TV. I didn't read about them in books. And then once I got to college, I better understood the ways that people had differing opinions and feelings about what abortion should or shouldn't be for people like me.
I agree. And I wanted to add for people like us.
Yeah. For people like us. That's right. I really just knew it from my environment, how Black people, Black women, Black girls were dealing with reproductive health issues. And I kind of came to this work indirectly. I went to a historically Black college that was a women's college. And so Black feminist thought was really seeped in the history and traditions at Spelman. And that certainly helped me to think really critically about gender and about sexism and about patriarchy. And through a very indirect route, I ended up working as a volunteer coordinator at Feminist Women's Health Center, one of the oldest abortion providers in Georgia. And I'm certainly glad that my path led me there.
Me too. Me too, you.
I remember when I started at Feminist Women's Health Center, I was a volunteer coordinator and was helping to train people in our community about reproductive health, rights, and justice, and how to take action at the Capitol, at the state Capitol, using public policy and advocacy to try to make change. At that time, this was 2013, so Georgia had what is legally called a 20-week ban, but that just meant that people couldn't get abortion after 21 weeks and 6 days from your first day of your last menstrual period. And when I first started, there was a long period of time where we didn't have any new bad laws pass. We were able to stop a lot of the attempts to erode reproductive justice for several years. But in 2019 was when what's called a 6-week ban passed in Georgia, meaning that we couldn't provide abortion care beyond the point that fetal cardiac activity is detectable using an ultrasound. And it passed in 2019, and that was, again, the first time in maybe 4 or 5 years that we had extreme anti-abortion legislation pass the state legislature. It was blocked by the courts because at that time, Roe was still the law of the land. And we continued to fight, and we were preparing for the potential big change in how we were able to offer care. But it didn't mean that we stopped fighting at the Capitol, informing our community, helping them understand what was at stake. And so over the course of that time, I also became Feminist Center's first Black executive director and really tried to shift our organization to focus on reproductive justice, not just abortion.
That's exceptional.
Work has been very hard. I'm not going to even pretend like it hasn't been really, really hard. But we persist, just as you talked about at the beginning, about how even when things feel maybe impossible, we keep going, we keep trying, we still make space to be astonished for things to go our way. I wonder what things have changed for you from then to now.
Well, big changes, personally and politically, obviously. My change from being a Catholic to being, it's sort of hard to describe, but it was an evolution that I never expected to have. I mean, from the time I was 5 years old, I defined myself as a Catholic and had lived that way for a long, long time. So it was my life. And so I was really quite astonished that I was on the other side of this chasm. And I didn't know, I found myself not knowing what space I actually occupied. It was hard. Excuse me. I mean, it was very, very hard to stay on the right path.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And then you had the political groups. I was part of this organization called the Chicago Women's Liberation Union. Not only that, but I started doing women's prison work. This was the time when Attica was on everybody's mind, and there was this move to improve prison work in general. So it was all encompassing. I mean, there was all of a sudden there was this women's rights for freedom.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. And I think that's one of the brilliant things about how Black women and other women of color really have charted a path for what reproductive justice can be, that it can't just be one thing, that we have to think about what's happening across lots of issues that affect our lives and not just ignore the parts that don't relate to abortion, that we're trying to make sure that people are able to survive and be well and in incarceration, trying to make sure that people have access to good jobs and safe homes, that we're thinking about people who are raising small kids and those who don't want to be pregnant at the same time. And so it's really remarkable that you were able to see those connections even then and make sure that your work included all of those parts of what it meant to be free.
Thank you. I mean, it was a challenge because there were so many issues and so many opportunities to go left or go right. And it was always something. It was always something. It was something to deal with. And we had no choice but to deal with them.
Which also sounds like now. It sounds so familiar, these ways that it's impossible to ignore when injustice is happening around you. And even though there may be forces that try to tell you that your choice is not the right one, your values lead you to make a decision to be on the freedom side, to be on the side of making sure that oppressed people have dignity and care.
Right. Absolutely.
So, one of the things that continues to persist is this idea that abortion and reproductive rights are a white woman's thing. But what we know is that Black women have always been on the front lines of this work and of this movement. Could you tell me a little bit about what it was like being a Black woman as a part of the Jane Collective that was majority white?
That's an excellent, excellent way to put it, because I felt fine being a Jane person. I felt fine putting up the phone messages, need an abortion, call Jane. I was very proud to post those messages. They made me very proud. I felt like I was actually doing something. I remember telling one of the members of our collective, I want to be on the action side of the movement. I don't want to sit around and talk about stuff. I actually wanted to make a difference, and making a difference meaning being in action, being at cause in the matter. I was honored. I felt proud, not only what I was doing, but what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
It was somewhat difficult family-wise. I was alienated from my family.
No, I understand. It can be hard when you have a conviction that is not necessarily accepted by the people that you love and care about and don't want to alienate. I know for me, my mother, when I was in college, worked at Planned Parenthood in St. Louis, and she was working in this movement well before I was. So it felt safe to talk to her about reproductive justice and reproductive rights and abortion. So I can't imagine what it's like to have your family not necessarily accept the values that you hold.
Right.
One thing that I wish more people understood about Black women's role in this movement is that we're here. I think there have been more strides recently to platform and present Black women leaders in reproductive health rights and justice. But oftentimes, the abortion stories that we are hearing very frequently don't necessarily feature us. So I'm hopeful that organizations like We Testify, that platform people of color telling their abortion stories, and the book that just came out, Liberating Abortion, that talks about the experiences of people of color across lots of different reproductive health issues, will be seen and experienced by people so that young folks, young Black girls, Black women, Black men and boys, Black queer and trans folks will be able to see themselves in this work, not just as patients, but also as participants and leaders.
Amen. Amen.
When you look at the ways that young people are organizing today. What inspires you?
That they keep doing it despite all the noise surrounding the issues.
Yeah, we don't give up, even when it gets hard.
They keep on pushing. And that's the thing that surprises me. I don't know that I was that game, so to speak.
Oh, you sound very tenacious. From everything you've shared, it sounds like you were absolutely committed to making change.
Yeah, and that's been my life. I wanted to be free.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to be free. And that part has never left me.
Can you tell me about what freedom would feel like?
Oh,
When you imagine it, what does it look like?
well, it's that song. Freedom, freedom, freedom. And I can't remember the rest of the verse.
It sounded beautiful.
Thank you.
I think about Nina Simone had a quote where she said, "Freedom is no fear." I think about that a lot. How many of our decisions about healthcare and about lots of other things are controlled by fear.
Yes.
And what it would feel like to not be afraid, to try, to be yourself, to ask for what you deserve.
Yes.
I think that's part of what I really want freedom to feel like for people who come after me.
Marching on the freedom land. That's what I want.
Yes, me too.
That's what I want.
I'm incredibly grateful to have had some time to talk to you this afternoon. I want you to know how proud I am of all the work that you have done, all the lives that you have affected, all the ways that you have stood by your own convictions and acted. You wanted to be in the action, and you absolutely were. And we are so thankful that you made that choice.
Thank you. Thank you for thanking me. Thank you for the support that I didn't know I had. Thank you for the support that all of the others whose voices that you reached didn't know that they had from you. It's just been a blessing. You know, that's one thing that I want to be clear. At the beginning of this podcast, I wanted to say that I don't feel like a hero or a heroine.
That's okay. One of my favorite quotes from the Combahee River Collective Statement is that we reject pedestals and 10 steps behind, that we get to be divinely human, that is actually our birthright, that we're not perfect, we're not superheroes, we are divinely human, and sometimes we do extraordinary things, and sometimes we do regular things. But that in itself is a miracle. You are absolutely a miracle.
I just feel ordinary, and that's all right.
That's all right.
That's all right.
To learn more about our guests, Miss Marie Leaner and Kwajelyn Jackson, check out our show notes. A very special thanks to Miss Erica Edwards. Natal is executive produced by me, Gabrielle Horton, and Martina Abrahams Alunga. Janelle B. Anderson is our lead producer, and Jordan McClinney is our production intern. This season was co-published and supported by the journalism nonprofit, the Economic Hardship Reporting Project. Visit natalstories.com for transcripts and more. You can follow us online at Natal Stories, and be sure to rate and review wherever you're listening.